I thought we were going to talk a lot more about Bob Baffert on this show because we talked a lot about him on the old show because he was always in the news. And it's just been very refreshing not to have to talk about him all the time and just have fun and talk about other things that interest us and piss us off. But Baffert, elbowed his way into the news this week because he and Amr Zedan have decided to drop their appeal, finally, at long last, of the Medina Spirit DQ in, what was that, the 2021 Derby? Yeah, so we're coming up on 3 years now, almost since when that happened. And I think a lot of people just assume that this is kind of a desperation ploy by Baffert and Zedan to try to get Churchill to drop their ban of him and his horses going into the Kentucky Derby. And at least for now, it seems like it hasn't worked. I'm just going to read the Baffert quote. It says, he posted this on Twitter. It says, "I've instructed my attorneys to dismiss the appeal related to the disqualification of Medina Spirit in the 2021 Kentucky Derby. Zedan racing owner Amr Zedan and I have decided that it is best to positively focus on the present and future that our great sport offers. We thank the KHRC and Churchill Downs for listening and considering our point of view, and we're grateful for the changes and clarity that HISA brings to the sport." Churchill, in response, Darren Rogers wrote, "Today's dismissal of appeal does not change the current suspension or deadline to transfer horses for the upcoming 150th Kentucky Derby." So it doesn't seem, at least right now, like if it is a ploy to get reinstated, that's going to work. I just, and I'm glad that they're finally going to put this behind them. But like, this is what should have happened 3 years ago. Like the fact that 3 years later, as if it just popped into their head, like, oh man, we want to focus on the positive things in the sport. Let's forget the last 3 years of hand wringing and drawing this out to try to get an appeal approved. Like, but Bob Baffert's problem to me in the first place was not necessarily the drug positive, as damning as that was in the public sphere. To me, in racing, what pissed people off and what rubbed me the wrong way was the media tour insisting that it was never his fault, that no responsibility should fall on him, pass the buck to anywhere else but him. To me, that was the biggest problem with the whole Medina Spirit thing. So the idea that after 3 years of that, now he's just going to suddenly drop it and, move forward in the interest of the sport, like, you should have done that years ago. There was no reason to drag this out and make it such a public fight other than ego. And, hopefully we can move forward.
And Joe, I think you're right. And look, I'm glad that they finally woke up and realized that they weren't going to, win this fight. They weren't going to win this fight in court, nor were they going to win it in the court of public opinion. Quite frankly, they were up against it on both sides. So it's good that they dropped it. I don't know if I would give them credit or negativity towards him dropping it now versus earlier or not having it in place at all. I think they were going through the legal process. I think finally they realized that they were up against it and they decided to pull the plug. Some people on Twitter are saying, this is why he's the GOAT, because he, is doing what's good for the sport. I think that's bullshit. And you're rolling your eyes. It was never about, was it good for the sport? It's always about, is it good for Zedan and for Baffert. I thought it was the first, when I very first read it, you and I were texting back and forth. And I think within the first 5 seconds, you and I said, oh, this is definitely a last ditch hope to try to get him, reinstated with Churchill Downs, because, oh, by the way, the 29th is the date when those horses of his have to be in somebody else's barn, training under somebody else's name if they want to be eligible for the Kentucky Derby. So to me, it was like, this is a Hail Mary there, or maybe they worked something out with Churchill Downs and they said, look, if we drop this and we play nice, then you'll allow me to have horses entered in the Kentucky Derby. That's because I'm cynical. That's immediately what went through my mind. The other cynical part of the story, Joe, for me, is that if you read online, if you go to the Blood Horse and Pollock and TDN, and you read the article. Now, it's the same set of facts. It's the same set of facts, the same press release, same information. But you have two egregiously different slants on what it means and whether or not, Bob was guilty of an infraction, or if he was, really guilty of a drug overage, and, whether or not he should be, raked over the coals for all these years, and that Churchill Downs is using this as a vendetta. To me, it amazes me that the journalism in America, and this isn't a story by any stretch, but it's even infected our industry where it's very slanted and polarizing. The coverage of something as innocent, or I shouldn't say innocent, as simple, because obviously he wasn't innocent, as simple as like, hey, he's dropping, the case and doesn't want to appeal this anymore and just kind of wants it to be, behind him. Those are the facts of the story. And then the way that's portrayed by the various news circuits in our industry are vastly different. And I think that anyone who's reading between the lines can see which of the writers get their bread buttered by the big farms and by association, by Bob Baffert. So I'm going to leave it at that. You can we have a very intelligent audience. You guys can read the articles and come to a conclusion. But I think if you look at it, they're written through very different lenses.
Well, and it's just he's such a polarizing guy to begin with. Like if you go on Twitter, it's always like Baffert is the most evil guy in the world, or Baffert is the greatest of all time, and everyone's just jealous. Like there's no room for nuance in that discussion. And I think he made racing look bad for a while with this thing, and he could have dropped it a lot sooner. And I can see both sides of it, because I think Churchill is also being pretty vindictive.
No
like
question.
We talked about this on the first episode of Rail Talk. I think that the continued ban of him seems petty. And I think, reasonable people would assume that it's because he was dragging this through the courts and fighting them tooth and nail on a drug positive from almost 3 years ago. And that's why they responded in the way they did, banning him for the next several derbies. So I honestly, next year, I don't want to hear about this shit anymore. I don't want to hear about Baffert or Medina Spirit or Churchill Downs or bans or this and that. Just let the guy run. And Bob, if something happens, if there's a drug positive or like a DQ or something you don't agree with, take it with some fucking grace, please. This was the problem to begin with, was the constant caterwauling about how he's been wronged. And, this is a minute positive and it didn't affect this. And it was from an ointment. It was so many explanations instead of just saying, look, the horse tested positive. It's on me. I'm the absolute insurer. I apologize. We'll move forward from this. That's all that had to be done in the first place. And here we are, January 2024, still talking about it, hopefully for the last time. I just wanted to transition from that, because you want to talk about things that took a long time to adjudicate. There's some breaking news as we came on today that the Jockey Club of Saudi Arabia is finally about ready, sort of, almost, kind of thinking about taking some steps to disqualify Maximum Security from a race that happened 4 years ago. 4 years ago, Maximum Security won the inaugural running of the Saudi Cup. And then soon after that, obviously, the revelations of the Jason Service wiretaps and doping bust came out. And there was this discussion of whether or not they were going to DQ Maximum Security and put up Midnight Bizou, who ran second in that race. I had to go back and look at how long ago this happened, and just think of all the things that have happened in the meantime. The story broke, COVID, the pandemic came and went. Jason Service went to trial. First, he was gonna fight the case. Then he decided to take a plea deal. Then he got his sentence, his 5-year sentence. Jorge Navarro got sentenced. The entire FBI indictments have wrapped up and been adjudicated with all sorts, I think dozens of convictions. And now the Jockey Club of Saudi Arabia decides I think they're almost ready to rule. What were we waiting for all this time, guys? I mean, it was tricky. I'll give him this. It was tricky in the sense that he didn't fail a drug test in that race. In terms of the actual running of the race, there was nothing really to report and nothing that was untoward that was going on, at least as far as we know. But if you're going to make this decision based on the news that happened 4 years ago, why? Sometimes I always think it's like American racing that takes forever and drags their feet on these things like that. But no, apparently it's a worldwide issue that we can't adjudicate obvious things seemingly within years. But here we are. It seems like Jeff Bloom's about to get a call and say, hey, you won a race from 4 years ago. Did you know that?
Right. And Joe, I didn't even realize, shame on me, I didn't realize that Saudi Arabia had a jockey club. I thought it was just the main man was there and he was, like Caesar, you want to, like that type of deal. So I wonder if, if having this announcement, if it ultimately shuts the door on, having to release the winning purse money to maximum security and to the West at all. I don't know if that's the real reason, because quite frankly, even if they got sued in American court, I think they would just disregard it because they don't have to abide by those rules. But it's what we've been talking about this for 4 or 5 years now, as long as we've been doing podcasts together, is the fact that we DJ Stable won't send horses to Saudi Arabia because they basically can say, we don't like you, Green, because of what you just said about Big Brown, and we're not gonna give you the purse money. And you know what? I would have no way of fighting it. Like there's nothing you can do. There's no governing body really there other than the Sultan that rules the roost there. So to me, it was like you didn't have any other options. If they tell you that your horse is going to be disqualified from any purse money, then you have to accept that. So yeah, I don't know if that's why they finally announced it, or if they just had to close the door to make it window dressing and look good. To me, it was much ado about nothing. If they had never announced this, I think we're 3, 4, 5 years past that point now, and it's like, who cares?
I got to say, I've said my piece about Gary West over the years employing Jason Service and then acting like he had no idea what was going on. But I will say, back in December 2022, this is over a year ago, when they were assuming that the horse was going to be DQ'd, he did take responsibility, sort of. He said, we believe in the justice system and have patiently waited for the legal prosecution to take its course. Now that Jason Service has entered a guilty plea, we want to make it clear that if the Saudi Cup decides to redistribute the purse, we would support that decision. Hopefully that action will prevent future conduct of this nature. We believe the decision to take the Saudi Cup purse from maximum security and redistribute it is the correct one. Never mind that you were enabling that kind of conduct in the past, but I do appreciate that he was willing to say, look, if the horse broke the rules, take the money away, totally understand. Bob Baffert could have learned from that about 3 years ago.
Well, no, you're absolutely right, and we've bashed owners on this show before, and I think you're right. That does need to be said. That that maybe it's a little too late, but the timing of it doesn't really matter. The point of the matter is that they recognized, hey, if our horse is disqualified for a medical reason, then, like you said, we are the ultimate insurer. We are the ones who have to take the brunt of the blame, because God knows if that horse won, a lot of owners grab the reins, and the bridle and walk that horse in with all pride and as well they should, because they own the horse. I shouldn't say as well they should. I personally don't like it when you take the reins away from the groom, but that's a whole other therapy session. But I'm glad to see that the West did say, you know what, if that's the rule, then we're abiding by it, and let's all move forward. Because then at least they owned it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And maybe by the next presidential election year, they'll actually redistribute the purse. We'll see.
Plus interest? Are they going to plus interest?